You know how easy, remember I used to tell how easy it is to be presidential? But you'd all be out of here right now. You'd be so bored.
Right now, here's the president.
I'm very presidential.
My fellow Americans,
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight.
tonight I am speaking to you.
And then you go, God bless you.
So help me God.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and good night.
That's easy. See, that's easy. If I came like a stiff, you guys wouldn't be here tonight.
Well, no, actually, we wouldn't be here tonight, but for the fact that Donald Trump's obsessing on a wall that's nothing more than a fantasy. And of course, as you know, and as you've heard, and as his own statistics show you from his own government, that his justification for that wall just is based on lies. And so, Mika, what we need to be looking at today is what's the impact of the speech? What's it mean as we move forward? But I think also, what's it mean about a White House in disarray that you have a president who announced to people yesterday afternoon he didn't want to do the speech. He didn't want to go down to the border, but he went ahead and did it anyway. And in effect, holding, a lot of people talking about, I'm holding the government hostage, holding this hostage, holding that hostage. Well, last night it was the TV networks that were held hostage for 8, 9, 10 minutes for a speech that broke no new ground, said absolutely nothing, and that is going to make every network have to re-examine whether they're going to carry his next speech.
A speech that denigrated and desecrated yet another kind of important facet of the presidency, which is that communication from the Oval Office between the president and the American people. Another thing bites the dust under the Trump administration, because there was no import, there was no national emergency, there was no credibility to what he was bringing to the table. It was rough. Along with Joe, Willie, and me, we had MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle, NBC News national political reporter Heidi Prisbilla, MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savelos. A lot happened yesterday before the president even sat down.
It really did. Hey, Willie, I want to read you a Bill Carter tweet after, and Clyde Haberman said about the same thing. Bill Carter, serious question. What justification was there for an Oval Office address? Not one thing had not been said before. Networks should feel totally burned. Shouldn't they come out and tell the White House that was a fraudulent request? Forget asking for platform for your political posturing ever again. Does Bill Carter make a good point?
Yeah, I think he does. I mean, you have to review now and think about the next time the president requests that all the networks shut down their hour or give him 10 minutes to speak, and obviously the pregame that comes with it and the discussion afterward. Why? What is he doing? What is exactly the objective here? And from his point of view, Joe, I think we can talk about the rhetoric, we can talk about the substance of what he said, but strategically, why? He gave a speech he could have given 3 years ago. He was speaking, he was preaching to the converted. He was giving a speech to a Fox News audience that was already with him on this. Why a national address on this? And as you point out, an address that he said, the New York Times reported, he didn't even want to make yesterday. So you look at it and you say, okay, from the point of view of the networks, let's take a hard look at whether or not we give over our time to this president again. And from the point of view of the president, what was the point of that exercise? It felt, and this entire process, by the way, feels like a colossal waste of time so he can deliver on a chant he began 3 years ago at some of his rallies. The government is tied up because of it. We're tied up because of it. The American people are tied up because of it. And it's all about nothing.
It is. It remains a Seinfeld shutdown. All about nothing. Mike Barnicle, again, his heart wasn't even in it last night. He's not really good in that medium. He's, as we've all said before, he can do things in front of a crowd that very few politicians can ever do. But you know, again, most of the people that looked at this were asking the same thing. Why was he there? And why did his White House staff allow him to waste one of the most powerful tools in any president's political arsenal? Here's Jonathan Martin. asking last night, what is the strategy behind asking for 10 minutes from the networks just to do a Stephen Miller jag with no bigger plan? I guess those final words, what everybody, when they start to lose their head, for good reason, about the Trump presidency, need to understand about this man, need to understand about this presidency. There is no bigger plan. It is day trading personified in politics.
Joe, I mean, that was so clear last night. This is a speech that he has given multiple times in the past, as Willie just alluded to, from his primary campaigns to the Republican convention in Cleveland to nearly every day, the wall, the wall, the wall. But it raises the question, an important one, for the presidency and for the citizens of this country, the television coverage of that speech last night. What happens when there is a real crisis, when there is a real emergency? Does he take to the airwaves? Do we give him the airwaves? Do we believe him? That's a real question that's going to have to be answered.
Yeah.
And the president continually refers to, he gets right up to the edge of this as a national emergency. Well, there is a national emergency, I would submit, and we saw it last night. It's him.
Yeah, you know, Mika,
Wow. Yes.
It's the same question we ask about Kristen Nielsen and the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
She's already been out lying about a crisis on the southern border of epic proportions. She's twisted facts around what happens when we have a real national emergency. Well, I think most Americans aren't going to take her at her word because she's been lying so much for this president over the past few months. I want to go back, though, to something that Willie said, Mika, and that is this was an address that he could have delivered on Fox News primetime. And he would have reached his same audience. He would have converted the same number of people, which is zero, because if they were watching him on Fox News in primetime, chances are very good they'd already be on his side. But last night, he converted no one. Last night, he made himself look even more inept. Last night, he made himself look even more lost. And there's a new Reuters poll out today saying that more Americans are blaming Donald Trump for the shutdown and less Americans support what he's doing. Meanwhile, Republicans are just getting slaughtered in swing districts and slaughtered in special elections across America. Last night, we had a race in Virginia where, 8 years ago, Republicans were keeping it within the margin of error, and now they're losing by 35, 39 points.
Well, to everything you're saying, you have to wonder what is happening in the cabinet and with his staff. That's the big question mark to me, because people a lot smarter than me, Steve Schmidt, Mitt Romney, just to name a few, I think it's fair to say they think he's unfit to lead. And this exercise where everybody, networks, the Democrats, everybody is acting as if he's fit and taking part in this colossal waste of time, which would be this presidency, instead of looking at it and saying, this person is not fit to lead, and acting on that fact. I'm not sure why it's not happening. People smarter than me say that we're here, and yet we still have situations like last night. Now,
thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.